Jeanne, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be doing this with you.
Lisa, I'm honored.
No, we've known each other a long time.
Yes.
I first met you here in this room. I don't remember, 15, 16?
2004.
2004, okay, so 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing you teach and go, there's something really unique and anyway, I don't have to, but it's really nice to see you.
Oh, thank you.
And
I'm
for us
honored.
to be back. I mean, you are probably one of the most instrumental people in bringing us back, you know.
I'm the one with the big mouth.
Well, amen to that. So, you almost epitomize, as I kind of look at your career path. Now, many people, when they first get interested in yoga, young people, it's like, well, how can I live around these people? The energy here is really cool. And I mean, you've seen the whole thing from being a registrar behind the desk to a student and teacher training and being a teacher trainer of teacher training and then developing your own teacher training. It's been a long journey.
Yeah.
So what, and now you teach trainings all over the world, although now they're on Zoom.
Right now.
No. So what stands out for you over these last 16 years?
These are, you know, maybe I'm answering a question. When I started practicing here in 1985, 85 and 86, I was practicing here. And nobody could have told me. And then in 96, when I had a job downtown, a very important job in the arts business world, and I left to be a yoga teacher. And everyone was like, how are you ever going to survive as a yoga teacher in the 90s? And I came in before yoga became this big thing. Nobody could have, I mean, I never would have known that I was traveling to teach, that now I'm now teaching, any of us are teaching online, that I would teach here. And it's just, it really, I don't know that I'm answering your question, but I guess I'm remarking, and I really listen to my gut, which in yoga we would call buddhi. The intelligence that dwells within one, that if you get rid of all the busyness in the mind and all the rules and what everybody is doing, and the voice that says, just do this, because no signs pointed that this was going to be even a career.
Right.
I remember when you approached me on the last day of that training and said, I want to talk to you about your yoga career. And I was like, I've never used the C word with yoga. And it's just, and I have no idea, you know, it's like, what's your 3-year plan? I have no idea. But it's just interesting to see how things have evolved and how yoga has evolved. And I guess so, I think your question was, you know, what do you take from this? It's like, it's remarkable, and I keep going back to just listening. You know, especially when I'm hitting a plateau of what's next, where do I go? Should I go give it up and go be a secretary? Because I have many times when it's just like, I think this is it, I'm done. And whenever I ask that question in this room, because many times I've sat up there and I felt just, you know, like I'm at the dead end. And often when kids are in Shavasana, I'm like, where do I go? Is this the end? And I've never gotten the answer yes. And even when we said goodbye to the studio, I just, you know, because I do feel a connection in this space. And I was like, is it goodbye? And it felt like it's more so long. And it was like, am I supposed to just experience vairagya, non-attachment? And I remember walking by the building and going, yeah, that was a whole world, and now it's not. I don't know. And so it's really interesting. It's like, it's not done.
It makes me think of when I first started yoga, and I so appreciate everything you say, kind of putting it into a big perspective, because you and I have been, you know, since the 80s, we've seen the arc of yoga go through so many phases. when I first started teaching, I'd tell people I teach yoga, and they'd say, "Oh, you chant and burn incense?" And I'd say, "Well, not exactly." And now I teach yoga, they say, "Oh, you mean I'll sweat a lot?" I say, "Well," so just how kind of the mainstream sees it, you know.
Yes, and it keeps
you know,
changing.
And having gone through, you know, the phases where there was flow yoga, and then there were certain styles of yoga that became very institutionalized, and there were methodologies, and there was a whole maturation process, you know, just like a very funny analogy, but just like what, say, acupuncture went through. It was considered alternative, it was, and then slowly as it became more accepted, as there was research done, as more people were feeling good with that experience, you know, it then became mainstream, and it's now recognized as, you know, complementary or alternative medicine. And yet right now we're going through such an interesting shift. You know? I mean, we've both been in studios, you've developed your teacher training, and now suddenly you've taught in Cambodia and Mexico and Europe and Spain, and you know, you've done magnificent things.
Oh, yeah, I'm grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't always easy for you, I know.
No, and even when, you know, truth is, you know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're so successful, you know, you're everywhere." And it's like, I mean, I was out there, but it was really, really hard, either on my body, or many times the studio wouldn't market as well. So what you don't show is that you're teaching in front of 3 or 4 people, you know, but you just keep going. And I think those who just keep going, I remember you were talking about different types of yoga that would come up. Like, you know, if you remember, there was the Anusara phase, and before that, Guru Mukh had her phase in her home before she moved to the studio and everything. And before that, there was something else. And whenever I had mentors, and they'd be like, "But what about that or this?" And I always would just say, "Let's see who's still teaching in 5 years." And often the people who were like at the peak 5 years later, they're not around. And it's like there are a few of us who are still around. And so maybe the goal is not to get to the top of the mountain. Maybe the goal is to be in the middle of the wave and just to keep going. Because if you look at, I don't know, I don't want to get too, you're the poet, so I can't do that. But it's just to stay steady and just to keep going. And you don't always have such highs. Maybe not. I don't know. It's just, I just keep going.
It makes me think of what you said earlier, that the awakening, the buddhi.
Yeah.
You know, that I know the Russian abstract expressionist Kandinsky, he had this inner necessity. You know, I mean, he painted, he was doing radical things that were different. He was compelled.
Yes.
You know, and I remember one of the very first teacher trainings I took in like 1990, you know, and the instructor asked each of, "Why do you do yoga?" "I have to."
Exactly.
You know, it's just like it's you know, and with that kind of inner necessity, you know, I know my 2 younger brothers had more traditional career paths. They're both now younger, unemployed, retired, you know, and I'm thriving, you know, and it's not always smooth. Like,
no,
like
nothing is.
But the practice.
Yeah, and the practice, I mean, I've had phases and up and down where my asana was not as extreme because of pain or because of schedule. But then it was, asana doesn't sum up yoga, and yoga isn't all represented by asana. So it was, you know, I have a steady meditation practice, and I have other pieces.
So tell me about that, because you know, most people relate to yoga as the postures, you know.
And it's the most accessible.
You know, and yet that's just like the skin, underneath the skin. There's, so.
You know, I remember studying again in this space, and a teacher that I was apprenticing under and subbing for when she was sick, she couldn't teach for a while, and I was like, "Oh, you could do pranayama meditation," and she was like, "No," and I was like, "Whoa." But and it was where she was at the time. And I knew I wanted to meditate, but I was in the Ayurvedic world, we would call it vata. My mind was everywhere. And it was an intelligent mind, but it was everywhere and could not calm. And I knew, though, that was the real goal of yoga. And so I couldn't meditate. So I read books and got magazines about it. And I started to show up to different meditation centers all over Los Angeles, trying different modalities and methodologies. And then in this room, I met the first teacher that I really dove hard into, which was Rod Stryker. And his approach to meditation was I was already doing a lot of Buddhism, and which I really liked. And I was finally getting a hang of quieting my mind. And then Tantra, which was what Rod was really teaching, was activating your mind. I was like, I just figured this out, getting quiet. Now you're messing me up. So anyway, just studying, and I'm still studying with different teachers, and I don't have one set practice. I did for many years. For a decade, I did one thing. And now I'm really playing around and kind of like in the modern dance and meditation. But I can notice when I can do all the yoga in the world. There's a famous bumper sticker. You can do all the yoga in the world. You can't burn off crazy. I can do all the yoga in the world, and there's still something that's unsettled. And when I sit, I can't guarantee, and I will not profess that I am serene and settled every time I sit. Hari Om to those who do. But at least I've made friends with whatever wrestling is coming to the surface. And I probe into it, and I look into it, so that it's not unconnected. I've made friends with it. And then it doesn't scare me and throw me off. And then the world doesn't throw me off.
Yes, I think kind of in hearing you talk, what comes to my mind is, for some reason, a tree. You know, and the tree.
Oh, a tree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a tree that grows, you know, with leaves and branches.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the tree's there with leaves and branches, and the wind comes along, and all the leaves rustle. And sometimes it's just a soft breeze, and sometimes it's a big wind. No, but the tree is there, and with the sun, it opens to the sun, and the tree is there, and so you know. So you've mentioned meditation as one way to kind of notice. Well, when is it restless, or when is it, you know, when is it calm, and what's arising, and what's fading, and you've developed in your teacher training and in your practice different modalities. I'm really interested in the subtle body work, in the chanting. And, you know, these are just delicious practices that I don't hear about very often.
Yeah, you know, taking from all the stuff that I'd learned, mostly from the time that I'd spent with Rod, it was 20 good years, and he taught a certain way that, you know, it was his sequencing, and a lot of people follow that. And there was a piece of me, and it was like, but I still love the flow. And there is an exercise component about asana that I love. And it was like, I really feel that the two can go together. And I am the outlier in that way. That's, you know, and it took me a long time, and I bless any student who studied with me or practiced or took class with me for a while, because I was trying to figure it out, and they were stuck in the middle of me figuring it out. But I really do believe that you can weave in the esoteric aspects of yoga in a fun asana class. You can't overwhelm the asana class. And my philosophy is, I don't always have a peak pose, which is a good thing to teach for a 200-hour training. I work on how is the group, and where do they need to be, and what's the energy doing, and what do they need, and how can I help that energy. And my main thing is helping people tune in to an inner truth. Because most people, it's not just LA, but even when I teach anywhere, we're just human. We get pulled into so many different things, and we forget our own voice, our own buddhi that takes us to our soul's essence. And so I weave in the different pieces. Sometimes it's mantra, sometimes it's breathing direction or a chakra, and all of these just happen to be from the subtle body. And it's also tantra.
Is the subtle body unique to Tantra?
I don't think so. I don't think Tantra gets to claim it as theirs. I don't think that's fair. Yeah. The subtle body exists, and anyone who wants to play with it gets to play with it. Iyengar, when he wrote his last book, it was actually broken into the koshas. Mm-hmm. And it's for anyone. It's just, there's so many tools in the Tantric toolbox that we can pull from. And so I just use subtle body because it's a good, catchy phrase that gets people in.
Yeah, I really appreciate the phrase to capitalize on Guruji Iyengar's last book, Light on Life. You know, the koshas, not everybody's familiar with that phrase.
Okay, yeah, the layers of one's energy and being that were not just the physical form.
Kind of the structural form and the energetic form and the mental form and that part that can discern, and then that kind of wise, composed center.
Right, and our soul's essence, yeah. That we are all of that. We're not just what we see in our physical.
So I have taken classes with you where you have introduced the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and, you know, some of these wonderful wisdom teachings, and coming from classic yoga. And so the mantras and the chakras, and are they introduced in those teachings?
In the Upanishads, there are a number of Upanishads that reference the koshas, and I'm actually preparing for a course that's I'm going to offer in March. So on one specific Upanishad, the Kata, and it actually references the cave of the heart, which is referenced in Sutra 136, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So there are things, the more you dive, you can say, oh, that actually was, and definitely a lot of, the Bhagavad Gita is technically an Upanishad. So, but it all can cross-reference. It's not, I don't think it's purposed, but the more you expose yourself and dive in, you're like, oh, I remember from that. And that makes it, to me, fun, but then I'm also a nerd, so I nerd out.
The wisdom teachings, the Upanishads, you know, that the word Upanishad, as you've explained, you know, when a group of people sit in the presence of somebody who embodies, you know, that wisdom knowledge. And I find it fascinating that so many of them are in the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student, you know, and, you know, so it's just the passing on of experience, you know, and you're so generous in acknowledging your teachers, and so many of the teachers here at the Center for Yoga acknowledge you.
Oh, wow.
You know, and you know, not old. You know, who either mentored with you or studied with you. So, if I were your student, can you teach me? Can you give me an example of how you might, in a real simple pose, kind of incorporate some of the subtle body, these other layers of practice?
Okay, so, let's explore simple seated. So arms by your side, turning the inner arms up so the blades are on your back. On an inhale, reach the arms all the way up. On an exhale, take the left hand down, lean over to the left, and elongate through the right arm. Now, as you lean over, the average person, when we breathe, it's stretching the intercostal muscles on your right side. It's expanding the lungs. So it's going to give an energy of lifting. Okay, so in inhale, come on up, bring the arms down, and you're probably going to feel on your right side like this lifting energy.
Kind of a presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but that, it's like we want to have that stretch to increase our breathing, but let's say it's middle of winter and it's super cold and windy, we don't need any more lifting energy. So inhale, take the arms up, Exhale, left arm comes down, lean over. Now, inhale, ujjayi, all the way down to the root base. Exhale from the pelvic floor into the earth, which is hard. Inhale further, down, 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 as if you could feel the energy of your breath, not the literal oxygen, the energy touch and make connection to the right sit bone. And then exhale into the earth. So it actually can create a grounding while you're expanding. And then inhale, come on up. Exhale, arms down. And it goes contrary. A lot of asana is, this lifting, and a lot of students are breathing only in the upper register. And I observe that people can leave still anxious. Mm-hmm. And now Los Angeles is an anxious city. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I won't necessarily change the movement of the popular habits, but maybe I'll change the breathing, or I'll change where the eyes go, or I'll ask people to visualize something within, or I'll ask them to use mantra, which, and everyone's like, I don't want to om out loud. And it's like, yeah, try it. And once they start to do it together, and the voices, and then all of a sudden you tap into this inner power. And these are just things. Other things I might do and work with the mind. And, or even go deeper to the truth. So it's like working mostly the three middle koshas, different things to attend. And that way it's not just an asana, but there's so much more to it, because yoga isn't just asana, and you can get the more while you're on your mat doing asana, I believe.
It's interesting what I felt as you told me that is, with that exhalation, taking everything down, I felt, some abdominal engagement and contraction, and then that kind of made me feel more solid. Yeah. Whereas normally I would just kind of go with, I'm stretching up, but now I have this kind of solid base.
Exactly. So this might be more of a root chakra thing. This might be more of just getting grounded. There's different reasons. If someone's Ayurvedic situation, the vata was high, this is something I would do to help add kapha. Mm-hmm. So I go from different perspectives. So in Tantra we use everything. It's not just subtle body. I might use astronomy or astrology or Ayurveda or, different, just other things.
Very, very, very holistic. So,
yeah.
So you have studied far and wide in this cornucopia of practice, which really, so I know, I knew the time would go too quickly with you, but I know you love to cook.
I do. It's my one space to be really creative, that I don't have to use my brain to really work hard at something.
What did you make last night?
Well, last night I had dinner with Whitney Allen.
Oh,
I met her after class.
I just talked to Whitney.
I know. But let's say the last real meal, because I've been piecing together, the last real thing I made was, I usually just do a pot of beans. I don't follow recipes. I go to the farmer's market or a grocery store and I find whatever vegetables call me. And I don't have time for recipes right now, because I'm doing so much else. And it's just back in the old days before recipes, how did people cook?
What did you get out of your garden?
And you just pull out and you're like, who wants to go together? And what colors work and what textures, and then what sort of protein, and if it's vegetarian, it's a lentil with a carbohydrate.
So when you cook intuitively, the same way you intuit what your students or what your class needs,
and the same way I sequence.
Cornucopia that you pick from.
So I have everything in the refrigerator of my brain, or the file cabinet, and I pull it out. And it's like, let's use, and then halfway through the class, it's like, no, putting that back, let's go here. And so, that's how I create, and it's nothing brilliant, but it's food.
Nourishment for the body, nourishment for the heart, nourishment for the community.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being such a critical
thank you,
and
Lisa.
Warming and really seminal part of our new awakening. Okay.
The spirits, I think, here are very happy.
Yes,
it's an honor.
yes, the spirits are.
Huge honor to have you with us at the helm.
Wow.
What an honor. Thank
Thank
you.
you, honey. Om home.
All the way home.